And welcome back, everybody. This is for my U.S. History 2 students looking at Concept 2 of the New Deal. So today we're going to discuss the three patterns of the New Deal and the three role of the so-called three R's. Just to itemize them right in front of you so you can see them. If you haven't written this down, write it down. The three New Deals, you have the first New Deal, the second New Deal, and the third New Deal, basically kind of corresponding with this first three terms. And I'll give you more details on that in just a little bit. And then threaded throughout these so-called New Deals, you have relief, you have recovery, and you have reform. And again, the purpose of this concept is to give you details on that. So, make sure that comes up okay. There we go. So Concept 2, again, discuss the patterns of the New Deal and the three R's. So relief, we'll be looking at relief first with the first New Deal. It seemed to many historians Roosevelt placed relief and recovery a bit ahead of reform between 1933 and 1935, the first New Deal, and then revised the apparent priorities while still wanting all three from 1935 to the end of the New Deal, usually dated 1938. The second one would be 1935 to 1937, and the third 1937 to 1938. Just to place those in historical context. So the first New Deal, 1933 to 1935, sprang into life during the so-called first 100 days in 1933. Combined mostly unemployment relief with national planning coordinated by the federal government to bring about recovery. Right. So this was the big issue: how to recover basically day-to-day living for millions of American people. In the area of relief, the first New Deal passed the following acts: the Federal Emergency Relief Act. Excellent. Thanks. All right. Of 1933, authorized grants to states in proportion to the amount spent on relief by the states. You had the Public Work Administration, the PWA, in 1933, and it established under the NIRA to increase employment through projects such as construction of roads and public buildings. And then you had the Civilian Conservation Corps, the CCC, of 1933, an agency to give employment on soil, road, reforestation projects to males between 18 and 25. However, one major problem with relief was it led to an unbalanced budget and deficit spending. According to Keynesian economic theory, and Keynesian economic theory is you want, in times of plenty, maybe the government should break down spending, but when times are rough in the private sector, this is when the government needs to pick up things to kind of ease the natural tendency of capitalist economies in boom and bust. So the idea is that during a depression, a nation should stimulate the economy by spending more than it took in. So actual deficit spending. When prosperity returns, it should balance the scale by increasing taxes and cutting back on spending. So this is the Keynesian model that would be adopted under the New Deal, and is for all intents and purposes still with us. Recovery was based on government planning by the use of the National Recovery Administration, the NRA, which was created under the National Industrial Recovery Act of 1933. Its main goal was to cut excess production so as to stabilize the market for big producers and develop a cooperative relationship with business, consumers, and labor. The TVA was another attempt at recovery, the Tennessee Valley Administration. We'll talk more about that later in detail, by trying to rebuild the economy of a 5 to 6 state region throughout government's planning and financing. The second New Deal came into being in 35 after Roosevelt delivered his annual State of the Union message to Congress, declaring he must, quote, quit this business of relief, unquote. He spoke of unfinished business, including public works and comprehensive Social Security program. In the same year, the Supreme Court, by a 9-0 vote, invalidated the NRA, which was the centerpiece of the first New Deal. Roosevelt denounced the court for its horse and buggy interpretation of the Constitution, as he put it, and energetically engaged in a broad range of reforms, such as the Social Security Act of 1935, which established a program for retirement pensions, unemployment insurance, and other social welfare services. The act was an attempt to redistribute income to lower end and social on the social scale. So part of the thing people are getting used to during the Great Depression is seeing people who have worked hard all their lives, good, honest, hardworking people, digging out of trash cans for their next meal, living in boxes, living in what they would call Hoovervilles, and using Hoover blankets, newspapers. So the Social Security Act was trying to restore a sense of dignity to those people that had worked all their lives, and giving them some sort of basis of income. And this is basically what we still have today. This is the whole idea of the Social Security Act, is to make sure that people who have done their fair share can live their later lives with dignity. The Wagner Act of 1935, also known as the National Labor Relations Act, made it illegal for an employer to refuse to bargain with a union, and allowed the federal government to intervene in relations between labor and capital in a more forceful way in order to protect labor from being deprived of their negotiating power by big business. The act also outlawed a list of unfair labor practices, partly as a result of the Wagner Act, but also as a result of the 1937 Depression. Union membership tripled between 1933 and 1939, from 3 million to over 9 million people. The Wagner Act was another way of redistributing the income of society through the wage and job benefit system. Right. So essentially, the Wagner Act is going to sanction and legalize unions, which had been always under question up until this act was passed. It's kind of interesting to see America's newfound appreciation of union labor via football. Right, we're seeing what skilled and organized labor is able to produce by seeing what happens when you have unskilled referees put into the game. Right, so maybe we can extend that to other sectors of the economy in order to have the best of the best in all professions. Another attempt at redistributing income and an indication of the direction of the Second New Deal was a changed emphasis in the taxation policy. On June 19th of 1935, Roosevelt urged Congress in a special message to revise the federal tax system with a view to accelerating progressive income taxation and, quote, encouraging a wider distribution of wealth, unquote. Congress quickly responded with a new tax law that sharply increased inheritance taxes, imposed a new surtax on net incomes over $50,000, which went up as high as 75%, and integrated a graduated income tax on corporations. The last reform measure was the Banking Act of 1935. It was designed to centralize the control of the national banking in Washington in order to prevent some of the problems and abuses that took place in the 1920s and 30s. So relief was still an issue for the Second New Deal, as Roosevelt focused on direct aid to workers and farmers rather than on recovery programs for business like the First New Deal. The Works Progress Administration, created in 1935, the WPA, employed over 3 million people in the first years and 8 million by 1943. Before it expired in 1943, the WPA had spent over $11 billion on public projects, right? Infusing that money into the economy. So working people being employed through government programs are going to stores, to going to restaurants, and going to local businesses and beginning to revitalize the economy is the concept behind it. The third New Deal, 1937 to 1938, by the end of 1936 and early 37, it appeared the country was getting back on its feet. So you have in 37, 38, basically 36 would be the beginning of the third New Deal. By 37, 38, you're going to be seeing action on the so-called New Deal because it looked like the economy was revitalizing. So Roosevelt supported measures of balancing the budget, cutting government spending, and increasing taxes as Keynesian economic theory advocated. In 1937, he cut federal expenditures by 25%, while tax revenues rose about 50%. These actions shaved the federal deficit to slightly over $1 billion. The dampening effects of smothered economic recovery, however, of course, other factors played a role, but the decline in deficit spending helped trigger one of the sharpest recessions in history. Basically a depression within a depression. Two major events of 1937. Hold on. Here we go. Okay. And hopefully this... Okay, sorry. Two major events in 1937 were to bring an end to the New Deal in 1938. The first was the Depression of 37, a big downturn within a downturn economy, which led to the stock market dropping in the spring of 1938 and increased unemployment. The second was Roosevelt's court-packing fight with the Supreme Court. Voters apparently disliked the idea of Roosevelt's attempt to alter the balance of power within the Constitution. These events shook the confidence not only of many voters, but many New Dealers themselves. The congressional elections of 1938 brought a coalition of conservative Republicans and Democrats to power, a coalition that made it virtually impossible to achieve any new legislation. Roosevelt was the victim of what some political scientists have called, quote, the deadlock of democracy. Presidential liberalism was neutralized by congressional conservatism. Kind of exactly what's going on today, actually. A president may have strong ideas, but Congress, however loosely organized and internally divided, is at least able to say no. So between 1938 and 1941, there was a stalemate between Roosevelt and Congress. By 1941, the Lend-Lease program and the impact of World War II pushed the economy into high gear. So the World War II, which is basically government spending infused into the economy, would vitalize the economy. Excellent, thank you. Well, email me if you have any questions, and I'll talk to you guys later. So ask me in class or through email. And I will talk to you guys later. Stay tuned for Concept 3.